Good morning, everyone in the room and online. Whew, it's Sunday morning. It's 9:15-ish a.m. Central Time. And that means it's time for the Sunday morning Science of Mind class here at CSLDallas. My name is Dr. Tracy Brown, and today we get to dive into Chapter 4 that we started last week. Chapter 4, we're going to begin on page 91 with the section labeled Subjective Intelligence. While you're looking for that, if this happens to be your first time engaging with us, then what we do every Sunday morning is we really literally go through the Science of Mind textbook, page by page, paragraph by paragraph, so that we can actually dive a little bit deeper, understand a little bit more in ways that will help us actually apply the teaching of the Science of Mind to our daily lives. So I'm going to start in reading. We're going to look at this section, Subjective Intelligence, and then we'll talk about it. So take notes, mental notes. If there are things that we are reading and you're like, I have no idea what that means, make a little mental note and we'll talk about it. Or if, as I'm reading, and some of you are reading along, if you're like, yeah, I get that, and you have an example in your life of how that applies, then get ready to share that too. So, beginning on page 91, Subjective Intelligence. The soul is immaterial as we think of matter, but it is the substance of spirit, and perhaps we could use the expression, it is the matter of spirit. As all matter in the physical world is supposed finally to resolve into the ether from which it came, we may think of the substance of soul as we think of the ether of science, and realize that all form finally becomes soul stuff again. Perhaps the simplest way would be to think of it as the last and final analysis of matter. We continue to use this word in the face of the knowledge that scientists, at least in theory, have already done away with matter. We know that matter comes from somewhere, and the teaching is that soul stuff is the source from which it comes. We must, however, distinguish soul stuff from soul. Soul is subjective intelligence, the principle just beneath spirit. For while soul may not have the conscious intelligence to choose, it certainly has the intelligence to execute the desire of spirit. It is never in any sense unconscious. The soul of the universe is next in principle to spirit, and it is the servant of spirit. The term soul stuff refers to the primordial or undifferentiated substance from which all things are made. Okay, I was going to keep reading, but I have to stop there because it's like
Tracy, you got to translate that into English. No,
it's like, okay, do I know what this means? Who knows? We'll see. I remember actually what was happening for me as I was reading it, as I was remembering probably the first 10 times I read it, and I would slow down and actually read it out loud because I would be reading it and thinking I understood it, but I didn't know what I was reading. And so then I would slow down and I would read it out loud, and then I would just close the book. Like, too much for me right now. So all of that was coming back to me, even though now I understand it well. So let's see if I can break it down a little bit. So for that, let's give a little context, right? We're in chapter 4, and last week Dr. Petra really worked through that first subsection on creative medium. And when we are talking about soul, we are remembering that we already looked at spirit, the thing that it is, the thing itself. We looked at the natural way of life, the beingness, and spent a lot of time there. And now we're going into soul as Ernest Holmes describes it. And as Dr. Petra explained last week, and I will say it this week, and she will say it again next week, and every week that we are in this chapter until we get past page 97, we will say it. Soul, as it is defined here, is tricky because we have so many human ways that we use the word soul. Right? Oh, you got soul. I listen to soul music. Oh, my soul hurts because of whatever happened, right? That hit me in my soul. We have so many human ways of defining or using soul. And what Ernest Holmes is doing in this chapter is he is using capital S soul as a way to indicate that part of spirit which is executing on the intention that has been set. So we have to expand beyond our human thinking about the word soul for this chapter to make any sense. And what was happening to me, the first probably 10 or 15 times I was reading this chapter, I didn't get that. And so I kept trying to go to soul as like something human or related to the human body or experience. This capital S soul has nothing, almost nothing to do with the human experience. So in the first section, which we already went over last week, the soul is the creative medium. It is the invisible that actually acts on the goal or the intention and makes it happen. It's a creative medium. It is the medium through which creation occurs. And we're now in subjective intelligence, which is just another way to say that it is the wisdom, it is the intelligence that creates whatever needs to be created because it is subject to the impress of spirit. It is subject to the direction of spirit. It is subject to the instruction of the universe to create something. So it has no consciousness of itself. It's not deciding what should or should not be created. It is simply creating based on the consciousness of spirit, declaring, claiming, deciding, intending something to be created.
You did it.
That's all that says.
Is that what, can we talk?
Well, I just have to repeat it because we don't, well, I don't because we have microphones and we have microphone runners. It's all good. What you got?
As I just understood that, maybe, it's like intention comes from somewhere, but we have an intention. And then some part of us takes over, we could call it a brain function. It's mindless, but it's constantly searching for the fulfillment of the intention. It searches the environment, it searches the internal environment, it searches the external environment to help us get there. But it doesn't have volition of its own, it just operates. Yes?
I wish
Yes?
we could get that facial expression. That was like the most priceless, perfect facial expression. So, yes and no. So, yes, that is how the universal principle works in our lives on the human plane when we, as the microcosm, are following universal spiritual law that is happening and the way it's designed on the macrocosm. So here's the deal. If we were back here in a chapter called The Practice of Spiritual Mind Healing, or The Principles of Successful Living, or even when we get to physical perfection, when we're further along in the textbook, Ernest Holmes is teaching us how to apply universal spiritual principle in our lives, in our human experience. And what you just described, Ross, was how it works in our human experience. What we're doing up here at the early part of the book is Ernest Holmes is saying this is just how it works. This is how it works on the universal plane, that there is a spiritual intention and spirit and soul, or this invisible mystical process makes that happen, and then the next chapter will be body and turns it into some form. Spirit, soul, body. The challenge is it's hard for us to talk about it without talking about it in our human experience. The reality, though, is we have to understand it, that it has nothing to do with our human experience is modeling what is happening universally. So it's not a process, or soul wasn't created in order to give us a way to navigate. Spirit and soul exist, and when we begin to live our lives in alignment with the way that it's been universally designed, then we begin to use the principle, use the existence of soul, use it, but it wasn't created for us. Yeah. So the reason I said yes and no is because yes, that is a great understanding of what Ernest Holmes writes about in subjective intelligence as it is applied to humanity. And now that you've got that, now I want you to stretch your brain and be like, what if there were no human beings?
No.
It would, it would still be happening.
That I get.
Yeah, so that's great. So, Ryan, wait just a minute. In a minute, Ryan's going to talk about how everybody can participate. And I want to highlight two things from these two paragraphs. We're on page 91 in the section Subjective Intelligence, if you just joined us or joined us since I was reading. And those two paragraphs, I want to highlight two sentences. Sentence number 1 that I want to highlight is in the first paragraph of that section. As all matter in the physical world is supposed finally to resolve into the ether from which it came, we can think of the substance of soul as we think of the ether of science, and realize that all form finally becomes soul stuff again. So there again, soul is invisible. It is not a person. It is just an invisible part of the creative process of whatever is being created. And whatever it creates is going to return to an invisible energy. And so the reference to the ether of science is, again, it's a lot of what we think of today as normal in the teens and the 1920s when Ernest Holmes was writing most of this, and then even in the 1930s when he revised and updated it. Really, that was an early stage of what we now call quantum physics. Didn't even exist then under that label, and understanding the energy, the invisible energy that is always there, or that is the stuff that, I don't want to say the stuff that makes stuff, but that's what I'm going to say. And then the second paragraph, the sentence I want to highlight is, we must, however, distinguish soul stuff from soul. No, the next one. Soul is subjective intelligence, the principle just beneath spirit. For while soul may not have the conscious intelligence to choose, it certainly has the intelligence to execute the desire of spirit. So again, that soul is delivering on whatever the decision or the intention that has been made or set by spirit. And in the room, I'm seeing some heads go up and down. So if you're online and this is starting to make sense or reminding you of what you already know, then I surely expect that whether it's on Zoom or Facebook, you're like, oh, now I get it. Yes, this makes sense. Put something in the chat. We need to know that I haven't put you to sleep, right? Or as Dr. Petra often says, I hope you've had your coffee. Since I don't drink coffee, I just don't want to put you to sleep. So, Ryan, how can people comment or participate?
Well, good morning to you, Dr. Tracy, and thank you so much. And welcome to everybody here in person and all across the globe that are watching us online as well, too. And as you mentioned, it is time for us to engage, so definitely want to hear from you. I see that we have one person online, and then we can come in here to the room. For the folks that I'm waving my hand at, if you can see me, you'll be on camera today, so if you do not want to be on camera, go over here to this side. All those I'm waving my hand to right now, you won't be on camera, but we'll still be able to hear you. I have the magnificent Patrick over here. He's going to be helping me with the microphone today. Please know that you'll be heard online and not here in the room. So speak up, speak loud, and say your question or comment. And for the folks that are joining us on Zoom, you know what time it is. It's raise your hand time. So hit the icon down below and you can get into the room that way. Or for those folks who are joining us via Facebook and on Zoom, you can put your question and comment inside of the chat, and I'll bring that into the room as well. And I always like to mention I keep those anonymous. That way we can continue to have a safe container for spiritual growth. And so let's kick it off with Connie. I see your hand is raised here online. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Good morning, Dr. Tracy.
Good morning, Connie.
I still need more understanding. I really do. It's going to take me a while, but I have a question. My intuition is just blossoming. It's flying free, and I'm learning how to trust it and go with it, go with the flow, so to speak. And it's working out beautifully. But how does that tie into what you're saying?
That's a great question that I am thinking through my Rolodex file in my brain to see how those connect. So I'm hesitating. Actually, 4 things went through my brain immediately about how they're connected. And I am also hesitating because I don't think I can emphasize enough that if we try to understand these 3 chapters, spirit, soul, and body, based on our human experience, we will miss the deeper dive that Ernest Holmes is writing about. At the same time, that's really frustrating because what else do we have to rely on except our human experience. So the connection between intuition and or what we commonly refer to as intuition. Like there's an inner wisdom within me that knows what to do, and it's, nudging me, it's whispering to me, it's giving me an idea, and I follow it, is not really, doesn't really have anything to do with soul. It does have a little bit to do with spirit, right? Spirit from the previous chapter, spirit, the all-knowing, always present, the nature of life itself, that the wisdom of spirit may be giving you some information, but it is not soul. And this is where it gets confusing, because the way we talk about soul in our everyday language would be like, oh, my soul is giving me guidance. Oh, my soul is doing this. But capital S soul only reacts. It is not initiating anything. It is taking what has been initiated by wisdom. It is taking what has been initiated by choice and then delivering on that instruction. But it is never going, your capital S soul is never going to be like, oh, Gordon, maybe now's time to look for a new job. But if Gordon decides, I'm looking for a new job, what I'm doing here is great, but I'm ready to have a different experience, and then Gordon says, I want to work in this kind of job, in this kind of environment, making X amount of money, then the human application of subjective mind, so it's not soul, but it's subjective mind, takes that information from Gordon and goes about, all right, let's make that happen. Like, how do I connect the dots? So it's tricky. But intuition's not connected there. Intuition would be connected to what then leads you to set an intention. What then leads you to make a decision? What leads you to create a clear definition of where you want to go? And maybe that internal wisdom allowed you to get there. One final comment about that, and that is, it really is a great question, Connie, because it helps to pull apart what's really happening. But the other thing about intuition for us is that it's coming from universal mind, right? It's coming from universal mind into our mind and merging. So it's a whole different part of the conversation. We're coming in the room.
All right, and then I have some folks here online.
From spirit comes the inspiration for what we want? That's a question.
No.
What part of us creates the desire that we want to fulfill in our lives?
So, give Patrick the microphone. So part of it is how you worded it. So from spirit comes the inspiration. No. Each one of us is created, and each one of us is a unique emanation of this experience of life. Spirit doesn't whisper in our ear saying, hey, Tracy, I think it'd be really cool if you did diversity and inclusion work in the world. Spirit doesn't whisper into, Ryan, oh, you need to do this, and you can be an artist, and you can learn this technology stuff. Spirit creates each one of us with this instruction to live life and live life fully, and you get to decide what that looks like. And so it is coming from within us, within ourselves, and we get to choose, we get to create. That's so much about what Science of Mind is about. What are you going to create in your life? How are you going to navigate? It's not predestined or predetermined, which is shaking your head because I know you already know that. So we have to be really careful and disciplined with ourselves, because it would be easy to say, oh, well, Spirit told me to do that and it worked out and that's great. Or Spirit told me to do that and it didn't work out. Like, what did I do wrong? Or maybe I heard it wrong. No, we get to determine, and then we are using these principles that we're talking about now on the universal level, but we have the opportunity to use them or utilize them, or my favorite way of talking about it, to align with that which is the way it works. I get to align with that to then create in my own life a life that I love to live and a life that contributes to a better world for everyone else. But it's not coming from Spirit, except that everything Spirit is already within you. And you have access to it.
I half get that.
Okay, we're going back online.
Yes, we're going to go ahead, and I have a question and a person that raises their hand. So I'm going to go to the person that raised their hand, and then I'll come back to the question here.
Okay.
Marjorie, would you like to go ahead and unmute yourself and join us?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Marjorie.
So this is really good stuff here. And to me, it's not helpful for me to try to separate the human experience from this entity or whatever, from the universal soul. And I think here where it says something like the soul of the universe is the servant of Spirit. And so whenever I think of myself as being as above, so below, that I am God in form, that I am the instrument through which God or Spirit operates, then the soul is that aspect of me, or all of us, or of anything, that is able to surrender to that is able to step aside from any intention or any volition of my own. Not that that is wrong or anything, but it's the part of me that is allowing myself to be used, and not only to be used, but actually to co-create with the universal soul. And I kind of like, put a little caveat in there for myself, saying that yes, it's not the same as the human experience, and at the same time, it is actually God in form. That's kind of my take on it anyway, at least for now. I might change my mind later.
Well, Marjorie, if you're like most of us who really go deeply into this work, we change our minds every time we get greater understanding. Like that's a part of it. When Ernest Holmes wrote about staying open at the top, he was not writing about changing the philosophy. He was writing about how as we learn and understand it more, as we apply the universal principles in our lives more, we have to stay open at the top, because the way we understand it and the way we apply it is going to consistently evolve. And if we say, oh, now I know it all and I understand it perfectly, then the way I understand it can never change. But then we have human experiences, and guess what? Our understanding expands, evolves, and changes. So Marjorie, I don't have a criticism about how you are working the different parts so that it makes sense to you and so you can incorporate it into how you are applying the principles. I don't have a criticism about that. What I have is an observation that is more general than specific to Marjorie. So why does Dr. Petra and why does Dr. Tracy keep going back to, we want you to separate the human experience from understanding? And there is a reason for that, and that is that so often we interpret and approach spiritual truth only as if spirit or God or the universe is a superhuman. So we anthropomorphize spirit or God. We think of it, this boundless energy, this infinite existing that creates all of life. We begin to fall into or trap ourselves into thinking of it as just a superhuman being. And so it is possible, Marjorie, to, when you really have done you've done enough work. You've been like grappling with this stuff for a while. So we can, I can do that for a minute and then say, I am the expression of spirit. All three parts are me. Spirit and soul and body are all me, because I am a physical representation of the divine. But I can only really do that effectively when I have gotten beyond the fact that the divine is it's a superhuman. And there's this it needs no help from me. It takes no direction from me, and everything's happening. Right? There are birds flying, and there's squirrels scampering up the tree, and there's the wind blowing, and there's the mountain that is snow-capped. There's everything that is happening that is life, that's not human life. And there are 8 billion more people beside me who are living their own lives, and I'm not doing any of that. I am doing my life. So that's the only reason we give the caution consistently and over, because if you're not able to separate, then there'll be other principles that will be harder to understand. Does that make any sense to, like, those of you in the room who I can see give me feedback? And then there is one thing about soul that is important that I do want to stress before we go to the question that's in the chat. And that is, the soul does not surrender.
It can't.
It cannot. It's not possible. The soul is not surrendering. The soul is not passive in any way. The soul is taking the intention or instruction, and then, well, sometimes I think about it like this. Let's say you have a 1,000-piece puzzle, and you're putting it together. You're looking for this piece that matches this piece. You're looking for the piece that has the straight side because it could be a border. You're looking for what has similar coloring in it. And then you're taking these pieces and you're putting them together, and then you have this 1,000-piece puzzle that looks like the picture on the box. So if you think about soul, soul is not surrendering. Soul is like, got it. Now let me find all the pieces that need to come together to make this happen and to create this puzzle. And the soul is actually executing because it is subject to the direction or the inclination or the intention of spirit. So soul doesn't have anything to do with surrender or with being passive. And so that also helps many people begin to be like, oh, but it's doing all of that in the invisible. I can't see it doing any of that. But it is executing on the invisible intention. Ryan.
Dr. Tracy, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So this is a little bit of comparison on Dr. Jung's work. So I'm gonna say it how it says it. If the soul is never unconscious, please differentiate the concept of Jung's collective unconsciousness, which is often at the root of our consciousness. You want me to reread that?
Well, you can reread it. It'll be helpful, but
It says, if the soul is never unconscious, please differentiate the concept of Jung's collective unconsciousness, which is often at the root of our consciousness.
so the shortest answer I can give to that, even though I understand the question, is I refuse to get into that conversation because we're not comparing spirituality to psychology. We're talking about the spiritual foundation for why things work, why the universe works the way it is. And so when we start looking at the psychology and what psychologists say about the human psyche and the human process, we're not talking about capital S soul. We're talking about the way we use soul in our everyday language and in our psychologized world. But the capital S soul is talking about the way the universal principles work, and that is never unconscious. It is purposeful. It is simply serving a different purpose. So whether we look at Jung or we look at Freud or we look at any of the psychologists and the theories about the human experience, we have language that has gotten into our way of communicating conscious, subconscious, unconscious from a psychology perspective that are two completely different things. So I remember Dr. Petra last week saying, there are some things that you just have to say, oh, I'm talking about science of mind, and this is what Ernest Holmes meant. Because as soon as you start trying to compare it to a different usage, your brain will go on tilt and you will start being more confused than having clarity. Okay, then we need a microphone over here.
Yes, let's go here into the room, and we'll just go ahead and say your name.
My name is Carmen. Dr. Tracy, I don't know, but your voice has stuck in my head ever since you did a presentation and celebration about paying attention to your miracles. And ever since then, I actually pay attention to my miracles. And what you're talking about, what I receive is that my 2024 is for me to get out of my way. And what I receive is that also receiving, but the opportunity to give and to do for others. And I had an opportunity this week where I had an instinct to go somewhere that I didn't want to go. But I said, you know what? I'm going to do something before I started thinking about why I shouldn't go and all these other thoughts that would stop me from actually doing it. I went ahead and did it. And I realized I met somebody there, and I was a blessing to them. And if I never wouldn't have went, I would never had that experience with that person. And so I was able to give back and to do, not to receive, but actually, to give back. And I think it comes down for me is that, when something comes to my head to do something, before I start thinking about and I tell myself, that's no longer you, Carmen. Like, I have to tell myself, I'm not doing it that way anymore. I'm doing it this way. And like what CSLDallas has always said, you talked about miracles, thriving, trust the process, and then thriving. And I feel like that's a process. Like, check your miracles, the process, and trust the process. And then I'm thriving now in the sense of not letting my ego or that other part of me dictate how I move differently now. And I feel that if I'm not moving I'm checking myself to make sure I'm not moving out of fear, doubt, jealousy, anything. Like if it's gratitude and love, then I think I'm going to trust that process and go with my gut instincts is telling me to go. And so that's how I'm using my intuition or how I'm, yeah. I'm gonna say that.
Beautiful, Carmen. And so when I set an intention to live my life in alignment with the spiritual principles I am knowing and learning and practicing, then yes, I will find myself having plenty of opportunities to choose what I do next, And so, again, it brings up that question that we started with earlier of, is it intuition? Is it a gut instinct? Is that the capital S soul directing me so that all these different pieces of the puzzle can come together? When we're like 10 chapters into the book and we're talking about the human application, maybe that'll be the time to revisit that a little bit. But yeah, it's things do change because soul at the universal level is making sure that whatever the intention is, which is to live life and to live more life, and to love and to be the example of these principles, to make sure that that is available and that you are in tune to it now. So you're getting in tune to it individually, but that's because you're getting in tune to it universally. So our time is just about up for today. I really encourage you, if this is a little confusing or seems a little amorphous, that you read part of chapter 4 between now and next week. Like, read it over and over and it'll start making more sense. And then next week we'll start in with the last chapter on page 91. If you're here on campus, please don't forget to take a few minutes and notice our artist of the month and the beautiful art that is around the room. And hopefully I'll see you in 30 minutes, whether it's online or on campus in our Sunday celebration. My name is Tracy Brown. This is the Sunday Science of Mind class. Have a great week, everybody.
All right.